You're listening to Seminary Dropout, and I'm your host, Shane Blackshear. In cooperation with missioalliance.org, straight from my house in Austin, Texas to yours, interviews with leading Christian authors, leaders, and thinkers, because good theology should be for everyone. This is Seminary Dropout. Let's go! Hey everybody, I just wanted to give a couple of announcements before the start of this interview. One is that Seminary Dropout is obviously always listener supported, but this episode and a few episodes to come are also supported by Fresh Expressions. I want to encourage you to go check out their national gathering coming up. You can check that out at steepletostreet.org. That's steeple as in a church steeple to street.org. Check out all the details for their upcoming gathering and for registration info. The other thing I want to say is that Fresh Expressions has a free gift for you, and if you will stay till the end, I'll give you details on how to redeem that. Okay, that's it. Enjoy the interview. My guest, Michael Beck, is the North Central District cultivator of Fresh Expressions for the Florida Conference of the United Methodist Church. He's also senior pastor of Wildwood and Oxford United Methodist Churches, where he directs addiction recovery programs, a jail ministry, a food pantry, and a network of Fresh Expressions that meet in places like tattoo parlors and burrito joints. He currently lives in Wildwood with his wife Jill and their blended family of 8 children. Michael, thanks for being on the show.
I'm blessed to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
So I kind of gave your Fresh Expressions resume there in your introduction. I really want to know about your church, especially being somewhat of a historic church. I know that it has a history of decline and then revitalization, and that Fresh Expressions played a huge role in that.
Absolutely. So actually, it's just Wildwood United Methodist Church.
Not Oxford anymore?
Not Oxford, no.
Okay.
But, Wildwood was established in 1881. It was a Methodist Episcopal South congregation at that time, and has been at the same location for most of that time. And Wildwood was a really kind of thriving railroad town up until about 30 years ago, when the railroad moved its central location, which took a lot of the jobs and a lot of the people. And then the church started at that time to decline a bit. Then within the last, pretty much the last 10 years before I came, there was significant decline. I kind of joke sometimes and say when we came to Wildwood, Jill and I and our blended family doubled the congregation our first Sunday.
Yeah, I bet.
So if you want to grow churches, just have a bunch of kids.
It's one way to go. It's one way to multiply.
That's one way to do it. And the folks that were there are just precious saints, most of them significantly older and had been kind of carrying the church for a long time with their prayers, their presence, their gifts, their service, and their witness. And they just had what I would call the gift of desperation in recovery terminology. They were pretty much ready to try anything to make their church, thrive again and revitalize. So I've kind of always done the Fresh Expressions thing, and I didn't have the terminology and the awesome processes and all those things that we provide now, but I've been doing those kinds of things throughout my ministry. So we got to work on that at Wildwood as soon as I arrived, and I just kind of set a boundary up front with the congregation and said, I actually preached a sermon series called The Open Door Policy, and took the door off the hinges of my office and put it in the sanctuary and said, I'm going to be visiting you and loving you and visiting you in your homes and caring for you and all that. But I'm not going to be in that office. And there's this guy named John Wesley who said, the world is my parish. And I'm going to be out in the community connecting with people. And I want to invite you to do that, locating those persons of peace that Jesus talks about in Luke 10 that open the doorway to different relational communities. And so I invited them to join me in doing that. And we started numerous Fresh Expressions. We now have 13 of them at Wildwood. and there's more kind of coming out of the gate all the time. And we also started a new worship experience, so we worship at about 200 now. But in those 13 fresh expressions, which meet all throughout the week, um, led by different, what I call ordinary heroes. These are just lay persons who feel the call of God to pastor and pioneer these little communities. So we have those from, anywhere from a dozen to 30 to 50 people meeting in those throughout the week.
So I know that Wildwood was down to about 30, and you
Yeah.
said about 6 years ago, and you said that you worship at about 200 right now. That's quite impressive, and it's very, very difficult and very rare for churches to be at that precipice of, perhaps closing their doors and then come back in such a way.
Yeah. And when we talk about fresh expressions, let me just clarify the goal is not to revitalize inherited congregations in the attractional mode. The goal is to reach not yet Christians, people that are probably never going to show up at our church. That whole 40-60 thing that Alan Hirsch talks about, the 60% that inherited church model just not going to reach ever. So the goal is to go out there and be the church with those people, but they ultimately do connect into the life of the church. And I would say most of we've had about 200 new members, and most of those have been professions of faith and baptisms and newer Christians, nuns and duns who have connected back to the life of the church. And some never will, but some actually do come back. So I see it as, while it's not the goal, an inadvertent kind of effect of adopting a missional fresh expression type mode is the existing congregation does actually get revitalized in the process.
In other words, the way that I've come to understand fresh expressions, it's not like you have the gathering and the tattoo parlor and the hope is that someday that they would quote unquote come to real church, but that actually is
Right.
a real church in and of itself.
Yes. Yeah. That's a really good comment, because a lot of times with our older folks who are really invested in the attractional mode, we hear that, like, when are those people going to come back to real church?
Sure.
Still, and
Yeah.
and we've
Yeah.
been doing it for 6 years, but just trying to help them understand that what we're doing in the tattoo parlor is church. We're having communion, we're worshiping. Yes, people are getting piercings and tattoos and all that, but we're also learning to bend our life to the truth of Scripture, and where discipleship is taking place there. So we try to, as a team, help them understand that that is an extension of our church. That their investment and their faithfulness is actually, that's a product of that, those folks that we're reaching.
And I think too that would be a very good tool to kind of help reframe a congregation's mindset to a kingdom ethic and a kingdom work. Because I think churches are so used to thinking of a quote unquote investment. So, like your church, at the very least, they probably spent some money to develop these fresh expressions. Probably not a lot, but some, if nothing else, they're paying your salary and you help start a bunch of these fresh expressions. And a lot of the mindset of some congregations is if they're willing to do something like that, it's okay, but this needs to come back and benefit us somehow. Like we said, people coming and actually participating in our location, people tithing back to our church, that sort of thing. Whereas really fresh expressions, the idea is that we believe that, the kingdom is growing and that is the reward in and of itself.
Absolutely, it is recovering kind of a kingdom mindset. And when we come back with the stories of some of the things that happen in the fresh expressions, people get fired up with the spirit of evangelism again and mission. And I mean, I'm a United Methodist elder, so we have definitely been in the institutional side of things for quite some time, and almost in a sense lost our movemental nature as a what was once a renewal movement within the larger church. So what this does, we have to maintain the institution and care for the center, while at the same time we stimulate the edge. And so this is allowing our congregation to recover that movemental nature, but still maintain that institutional, attractional hub. And I mean institutional not in a negative sense. I think we need institutions. Institutions form us as human community, and there's value in institutions. So where we're at is trying to figure out how do we sustain that, but at the same time go back to our apostolic DNA of being a sent movemental people, and can we do that from local congregations and restructure them in the way that can happen in like the mixed economy.
Let's talk about some of the fresh expressions that have come out of your church. I know from your website there's a burritos and Bibles. Now, is that considered one of your fresh expressions, or is that just like a Bible study from your church?
That is a fresh expression of church that meets in a Mexican restaurant.
Okay, that's what I thought. Cool. Like on Sunday nights, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So what's that look like?
So that looks like we have what we call go teams. So these are folks that spend time going to a Fresh Expressions Vision Day and a Pioneer Learning Community, and kind of understanding really what we're trying to do in the Fresh Expressions, and how to stay away from Christianese and folks that are just prepared for the kind of things that can happen in a Fresh Expression. And we invite people in our congregation if they want to come, because in the beginning stages of Burritos and Bibles, it was becoming just like 50 church folks gathering in a Mexican restaurant. So we had to say, listen, church people, stop coming unless you're going to bring a not yet Christian or a nominally religious friend with you. And the way that works is people are not really very open to coming, most folks, on Sunday morning. But when they share, hey, we do this thing where we kind of have church in a Mexican restaurant with all you can eat chips and salsa, and we just talk about Jesus, people are a lot more open to that. And so we have a steady stream of people who may have never been to church, or who this is their church. Like a year into it, somebody said, hey, this is kind of our church, isn't it? Shouldn't we take a offering?
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, glory to God. And so we emptied out the chips and salsa basket, and we started passing that to do some of the local mission stuff that some of the people in the group were interested in doing. So we have communion in there. It may be one of the only places you can have communion where you have like Jimi Hendrix or Led Zeppelin playing in the background. And we take a tortilla, the leftover tortilla, we break that and pass the high C in the chalice, and we have communion. And we do an inductive kind of, rather than the professional telling everybody what the Bible means, it's just a conversation, and we read a verse or two of scripture, and then we just talk about it, and people have questions. And sometimes the questions are like ultimate things that we just take for granted, like, oh, Jesus is God.
Yeah.
That's weird. Let's talk about that, those kind of things. And so we're prepared to just totally go wherever the Spirit goes. There's no like learning plan or anything.
Not much of an agenda.
Right. Exactly.
Did I see also there's a yoga therapy church?
Yeah. So at some point in this, I was starting to get a little burnout because I was doing a lot of these myself, and so we moved into this strategically team-based approach. And what we started doing, because we now had momentum and we had an influx of people that we were encountering in the Fresh Expressions, and people coming back and joining our church. And so we just started to ask two simple questions when we encountered people and they were interested in connecting more deeply. And we would say, what are your passions, your hobbies, your interests? Like, what do you do every week in your spare time for fun? And then the second question is, what networks, organizations, clubs, whatever, are you a part of that you participate in. And so Yoga Therapy Church started with Dr. Renee Kufu, who's a chiropractor and also a certified Amrit yoga instructor. And so I was like, well, I don't know what Amrit yoga is, but I'm sure we can turn that into church. And so we had some training and some time where we kind of, talked out what it was going to look like. And it's basically, she has this access to this whole network of yoga folks that do yoga that I don't have access to. So she started Yoga Therapy Church, which is stretching and yoga poses. And then this one's really early in its formative stages, but it's a light devotional from scripture. The prayer and the yoga actually is kind of the worship. So there's not like, music or anything like that. It's a little bit different form of worship, but it's definitely Christ-centered. And she takes people through that whole process, and then there's a centering time and all that meditation kind of stuff. So
we don't have to go through each of these, but also I think you mentioned there's one in a tattoo parlor, and then there's another one called Paws of Praise, which is like at a dog park.
Yeah, the tattoo parlor church. We just started some recovery programs at Wildwood, and we just were observing that it is really part of our culture. Folks are coming in with tattoos, fresh ink all the time, and we had a connection to a tattoo artist in the local shop, and so we started to ask, how can we transform that for Jesus, and how can we be an incarnate presence in the tattoo culture. And so because we had that person of peace and had a connection to the shop, Fat Cats Artistry, it's in downtown Ocala, Florida. And so we started small little group going in, talking about Jesus, getting faith-based tattoos. So we don't just get anything, but the idea is it's a sacrament in a sense. It's an outward expression of an inward grace. And people use this artistic expression as a kind of, form of identity, really. And so that's part of what we're doing. But the people are going back in the Bay getting tattoos while that's happening, scripture and dubs, and we have 40 something folks that have cross and flame tattoos now at our church. But there's worship happening there as well, and study of scripture and communion in the tattoo parlor. And the dog park, that was just one of the guys. He took the interest survey that I was telling you about. His name's Larry Gabriel, and he identifies himself as recovering Catholic, and he is very much involved in the Catholic Church and also kind of in our church as well. And so he said, I'm kind of boring, Pastor. I don't really do anything. I take my dog to the dog park. And so I was like, well, Larry, so you go to the same dog park every week with your dog. He has this huge Labradoodle named Rocky, and we have a little black pug named Vader. And they're like best friends. They go to church together on Saturdays. But I said, so you go to the same place and connect with the same people every week. You're just there in the dog park. And so that sounds like that could be church. And so we just, Larry leads that group. He's the pastor of Paws of Praise and does a little devotional. People gather, they bring their dogs. The humans have a passing of the peace. The dogs do a sniffing of the butts. And they just hang out, have fun, and then there's an intentional time of a devotional and prayer and those kind of things.
That's so cool, and I think that's a really good example of people may think they don't have anything to offer, or they're not a part of some group, but if they think hard enough, they probably are.
Right. Yeah.
You're writing a book on the mixed economy. That's a term you used earlier. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, for those who don't know, what exactly that is, and a little bit about your book.
Okay, sure. So the mixed economy is really, Fresh Expressions dumped over from the UK, and now it's taken on a life of its own in the US. Sounds like a little deja vu of the Methodist movement, right? But over there, that really is their kind of prominent mission strategy is the mixed economy. And what that means is attractional modes, like if you build it, they will come, steeple, like what we would understand in Christendom as our primary vehicle of worship and Christian formation. But that working together um, in this really kind of life-giving symbiotic way with these emerging forms of church, or these little missional incarnational communities that we call fresh expressions, and every congregation having the capacity to do both. So not abandoning that um, thing that's formed and been so meaningful, um, the attractional mode, but coupling that together and kind of awakening every local congregation to become a sending hub that releases the people in our pews to be a missionary force for God. Um, and exactly kind of what I've been telling you about it. The thing that I'm really, I think, one of the great blows to the Christian faith and our Western experience of it was the professionalization of the clergy. And this is a way to release, that Ephesians 4 stuff, apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, and teachers, which are filled, our churches are filled with them, and to kind of cultivate their gifts and release them onto the mission field to be pastors and apostles and prophets in their own right. So part of that, like at Wildwood, since 1881, we had 0 candidates for ordination. But in the last 2 years, we've actually had 5 folks who have experienced their calling through doing these fresh expressions. They're like, hey, you know what? I can lead a Bible study. I can connect people to Jesus. If Pastor Michael can do this, anybody can do this. So they're like, and I don't think that's the right answer for all people. I actually think, in a sense, it's better if folks don't go through a formal kind of ordination process. And we almost see Wildwood as an underground seminary, kind of where we're training and equipping, and we're not ordaining, we're not taking that step, but we're pretty close to it, and we're commissioning people to be missionaries to the community. So the mixed economy is all about those two things working together, and the interplay that takes place with the congregation with that is um, it's giving life back to the hub, to the inherited church. And it's kind of like the best way to explain it is what we see happening in the book of Acts, where you have Jerusalem and Antioch kind of happening simultaneously. So Jerusalem kind of embodying the attractional mode. There's the leaders there, the disciples who are with Jesus that are kind of calling the shots. But then you've got this weird kind of emerging thing that Paul's doing out there in Antioch, where the people are first called Christians, and it looks different, and it's with different people in different ways, and so you get that first kind of beer bottle fight in Acts 15, where some of the more prominent Jewish Christians are saying, "Hey, these Gentiles, they're not willing to put that kind of skin in the game. They're rebelling against the circumcision and not following the 613 restrictions." So they come together and have that meeting, and they kind of make some adjustments to the missional moment that's pregnant with potential, and they release the Paul and Antioch, those folks, and say, go do what you're doing, and they kind of just streamline down. Okay, we're gonna back off circumcision, which is a major transformation, because that was kind of the mark of what it meant to be a Jewish male. And then they reduce those 3 things, like don't eat stuff with blood in it, don't eat food sacrificed to idols, and um, and the sexual immorality stuff. And then they just kind of release that movement, and we see the two giving life to each other, the gathered and the scattered modes of the church. So there's the Paul's thing, which is happening in Lydia's house and the jailer's basement, and then you've got the Jerusalem kind of hub model, hub and spoke kind of thing going on, and the two are working together. So that's the mixed economy in a nutshell.
We've been talking a lot about on the show about Steeple to Street, the Fresh Expressions gathering coming up. You're going to lead a little workshop, and I wonder if you can give us a little bit of a taste about what you're going to present there.
Yeah, I'm gonna be doing a couple. One is gonna be just like super practical about how do you like, because all of us who are clergy, we understand there's not much more we can add to our weekly schedule of Bible studies and quilters guilds and United Methodist Women and preaching and PowerPoint preparing and all that stuff. So there's just some really simple tools that we've discovered in process that help equip and release our people and work in a strategically team-based way. So I want to just kind of establish a foundation for those practices and then give those tools away so that other leaders can do it, and also do it in a meaningful way for those who aren't clergy but are feeling called to be pioneers and to do this kind of work, and how we can really release them to do that. So that'll be my focus is the mixed economy, how to do it from a local church, how to sustain and care for the existing congregation with while at the same time trying to release the missional movemental stuff.
Was that both of them? You said you were doing more than one.
Yeah, there's we're gonna be leading a couple conversations. We've got Alan Hirsch and we're gonna be kind of I'm gonna be emceeing a little conversation with him and Matt Lake and a couple others, and basically just more dialogues. And honestly, there's a couple things that I'm doing that I haven't totally dug into
Sure.
yet. But looking forward to that. And the conference is going to be awesome. I mean, we've got Todd Paulsinger going to be there and Alan Hirsch and Graham Cray. I mean, so he's to me like the father of this whole Fresh Expressions movement. And to get to be there and hear and learn with these people, it's going to be just awesome.
Yeah, man, I just think if anybody out there who's listening, if you're a church planter, if you're interested in church planting, boy, I think this is like a must go to conference.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it doesn't get any better than this.
Just to be able to hear from and probably interact with, some of the leaders out there who are kind of on the cutting edge of what God's doing through his church, what we call Fresh Expressions, but we know are churches. Man, that's just invaluable, I think.
Yeah, and that's a key point. I mean, this is definitely church planting. It might not be your grandma's version of church planting, but this is these are churches. These are little micro communities of the gospel that have all the marks of the one holy Catholic Apostolic Church, and it's a different way, I think, to plant churches, because I kind of went through a church planting school and all that stuff in my conference, and it really gears you towards the brick and mortar paradigm. Like at some point, we're going to build a building that we'll have to own and take care of and all that. And I see this is really a church planting model that I see really just heavily throughout the book of Acts, which is less about owning spaces and connecting a church's identity to a building, and more connecting it to a people who are gathering all throughout the empire in these different places and spaces, but are fully, the church. So yeah, if that's something that you're passionate about, you definitely want to come and be a part of this conference.
Boy, I've felt for a long time that it seems as though churches kind of gave up on the Great Commission and just started doing capital campaigns instead.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they couldn't point to life change in people. So instead they decided they could point to a new building that was being built as evidence that God was at work. And I think one of the things I love about Fresh Expressions is it really flips that on its head and rearranges our priorities.
It does. It does. And it's hard for people that are really dug into the inherited mode to grasp this. I had one of my colleagues, couple months ago, in the North Central District, we have almost 60 fresh expressions in process. I think we're probably nationally, we have more fresh expressions probably in our district than probably the greatest concentration of them in the nation. And we've really just in our district released and cultivated folks to do this. But I had somebody tell me, I'm not willing to give up on the church yet, so I'm not going to get involved in this fresh expressions business. And I said, well, sir, I'm not willing to give up on the church yet either. That's
Right.
why I do fresh expressions, because I'm not willing to give up on the church, and we have to respond to the mission field, and we have to adapt to the changes in our culture so that we can connect people to Jesus in the new missional frontier. So it is definitely a different thing for people that have all they've known is that, inherited, you get people, you put the butts in the pews, and that's the why, and capital campaigns and stuff. So
I was talking a couple of weeks ago on here about how in the past, people who have felt a call to ministry and to church plant have been able to couple that with their career. And we're kind of coming to a place where that doesn't always work, and we have to uncouple those things. But bivocational work, it could be over romanticized sometimes, but I do think that it's probably the future of the church.
yeah, absolutely, because our denominations and the systems can't support in a post-Christendom world that full-time clergy kind of idea. So I think you're right. We're definitely moving into bivocational, and we're definitely moving into a new kind of. I'm just going to be honest with you. I think our seminaries and all our systems really are lagging in engaging what's happening on the missional frontier, and we're still training the pastor, shepherd, teacher kind of model and sending folks. I think, I'm not sure on the statistic, but I know it's a lot, like 80% of folks who graduate seminary quit ministry within 5 years.
Yeah.
Something astonishing like that. And it's because we're not equipped or prepared for what the reality of the local church. If people come and put their butts in the pews on Sundays, that's great, and that's a great training process, but that's not what's happening. And people aren't going to come to our churches no matter how great our music is or how good our coffee is, or if we sing Jesus is my boyfriend songs and try not to challenge people to a life of transformation. They still we live in a culture that's not on their radar. So getting out in the rhythms of people's daily life and being the church in their midst and watching how the Spirit is really moving and working in our communities and just joining in that disruptive work is so key.
Well, Michael, I've had such a good time talking with you and hearing about the wonderful things that God's doing in your church and the fresh expressions that you've begun. Thanks for taking the time.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Well, there it is, friends. My guess is that a lot of you are excited about fresh expressions and what it's doing in the world and maybe how you could even be a part of it. So I want to encourage you to go to the website for that national conference, steepletostreet.org. Please check it out. Even if you think you can't go, please go check it out and just check out the Fresh Expressions website as well. And speaking of that, I mentioned a free gift earlier that Fresh Expressions is offering to Seminary Dropout listeners. They wanted to give you a free ebook. It's called How to Start a New Kind of Church by Luke Edwards. And you can get that by going to freshexpressionsus.org/how-to-start. That's freshexpressionsus.org/how-to-start. And again, the book is How to Start a New Kind of Church. Okay, so thanks to Fresh Expressions. And remember, check out the national conference. Go to steepletostreet.org today. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Seminary Dropout. Remember, you can find all the show notes for this show and all shows at shaneblackshear.com. Oh, and hey, have you ever thought about starting your very own podcast? I bet you have. And I think you should do it. In fact, I've created a course just for you to teach you everything that I've learned over the last couple of years producing Seminary Dropout. So if you're interested in podcasting and want to learn how, go check out my course. You can go there by typing in podcastingforeveryone.org. And you can get a special discount by typing in the discount code Seminary Dropout, all one word. That'll give you 25% off. So go check it out. If you have any questions, let me know. Okay. Thanks to those that left ratings and reviews on iTunes this week. Remember, that keeps the show front and center. Also, remember, you can find me on Twitter at @beardonabike. That's @beardonabike. Also, I'm on Facebook, facebook.com/ShaneBlackshear123. And remember that Seminary Dropout is listener supported. You can visit supportseminarydropout.com and press Become a Patron. Remember, this music you're listening to right now is by D.L. Rossi. You can find him online on iTunes and at dlrossi.com. All right, thanks again for joining me for another episode of Seminary Dropout. Stay tuned for next week's episode. Love you. Take care.